Last summer, I published a short video where I shared an interesting little trick that you can do in sport climbing if you ever reach an anchor, only to discover that you haven't brought enough quick draws with you. Now, while some of you found it super interesting, others didn't seem quite so convinced. So in this video, we're going to be taking a closer look at this maneuver, discussing some of its pros and cons, and make sure you stick around to the end because we're going to be looking at a new and improved version of this maneuver that's going to be way better. Okay, so let's quickly go over the maneuver. You reach the anchor and you realize you haven't got any quick draws. So all you need to do is take a bite. We're going to pass it through one of the rings on the anchor, pull on that bite to get a good bit of slack, and pass the bite over our head and over our entire body actually. And then when we pull the slack back out of the system, it turns out that we've got a munter hitch on the anchor, okay? And now we can be lowered off of the anchor. In what situation might you actually be able to use this maneuver? Well, you need to have a pretty decent ledge. You want to have a good handhold, or if not a good handhold, maybe a chain on the anchor that you can hold on to. And really there needs to be no chance of falling at all because you're going to be taking a lot of slack into the system. And if you were to fall, it could be a bit of a nasty situation. So it needs to be super secure. Now, some of you in the comments seem to think that this maneuver was just completely unnecessary because you could always just down climb to the last bolt and get someone to send some gear up to you. Other people seem to think that if you reach the anchor without enough quick draws, then you're just a complete idiot because that should never happen. Well, unfortunately for me, I am one of those idiots and it has happened to me a bunch of times. So I can only imagine there are some more idiots out there just like me. And to be honest, the idea of down climbing and faffing around getting someone to send up a bunch of gear to me doesn't seem all that appealing. It's definitely not efficient. So if you can do a quick maneuver in less than 30 seconds to get yourself out of that situation, why not do it? Well, the main issue with this maneuver lies within the munter hitch itself. Munter hitches by definition generate a lot of friction, and sometimes with body weight alone, it's not enough to get yourself lowered off of the route. I weigh 85 kilos, I'm on the heavier side for a climber, and I struggle to get lowered down. If you add in some extra friction on the rock and maybe a few quick draws that are pulling tightly on the rope, then it could be near impossible to get lowered down with your body weight alone. This doesn't have to be such a big issue. Potentially, if you can reach the belayers strand, then you could pull up on the belayers strand of the rope to assist them in lowering you down. But that isn't always possible, so it's definitely not convenient to have that issue. And then, of course, there's the dreaded rope twisting. Yes, munter hitches twist ropes. That's just a fact. And unfortunately, if we get lowered down in this way, then a big section of our rope is going to be twisted, probably for the rest of the session. So yeah, not ideal. So how can we adapt this idea to try and avoid some of its negative aspects? Well, some of you suggested that you could just thread a bite through the anchor and then tie in directly to that bite, right? If I tied into my harness with this bite, I could then undo my original figure eight or my bowline, whatever I've got there, and I could be lowered off. And yeah, this is definitely the most efficient way to do this. The only issue is, unless you're some kind of knot tying wizard, I can only assume that you're going to need both hands to be able to tie that knot. And the reality is that on most sport climbing routes, you can't just take both your hands off the wall at the anchor. So yes, if it's an option that's available to you, do it, way more efficient, but it's probably not very likely that you can use that. So what we want is an efficient technique that allows us to keep one hand on the rock or on the chains, if we've got chains on the anchor, right? And doesn't cause excessive friction or rope twisting. Well, it turns out that there is a way. So after I published the video, another guide reached out to me, whose name escapes me right now, but I'll make sure it's showing on the screen, and shared his version. And the truth is that it just works way better. It gets rid of all of these problems. And yeah, it's just much, much more efficient. So let's dive in and take a look at this new and improved version. Okay, so it starts out the same. I reach the anchor, I find a nice good handhold, and then I can thread a bite through the anchor. Okay, now here's where things start to change a little bit. At this point, I'm going to give the bite 3 half twists. Okay, so I'm gonna give it 1, 2, and 3. And at that point, I'm then gonna thread my body through the bite, just as we would on the previous technique. Okay, notice I don't have to take my hand off at any point. I can switch hands, but I can always have one hand on the rock. Okay, I'm gonna pull in the slack, and now what we have, instead of a munter hitch, is some kind of weird, it's essentially a figure eight that has the chain running through the middle of the figure eight, or the anchor running through the middle of the figure eight, okay? It's quite cool. You should definitely experiment with this and see what it looks like. But now what that means, instead of being a munter hitch, it's just a fully fledged knot that I can actually completely weight, okay? So now I can take my hands off and I can clean the anchor pretty much just as I normally would. So I'm gonna take another bite, and this one I'm now gonna run through both of the rings in this case, because I don't have a chain connecting the two bolts here, but if you have a chain, then of course you wouldn't need to run it through both of them. And the only difference here is that I don't actually have a carabiner. Normally I'd just tie a figure of eight, right? And I would clip that to my harness with a carabiner. Well, I don't have that, so I need to somehow tie this bite into my harness. And I can do that in a couple of ways. I could thread it through the lower and upper part of my harness and tie a quick bowline. Okay, so there we have it. I don't know if you can see there, but I've got a bowline. Now I can untie my original figure eight, undo that weird figure eight thing that we've done on the anchor, and I'm just ready to be lowered down. Another option would be a double fisherman's knot. So I can take the bite that I've threaded through the anchor, and instead of passing it through both parts of the harness, I can go straight through my belay loop, and I can wrap that around a couple of times and thread it back up and through, tighten that and pull it tight to my belay loop, and then I've got a double fisherman's knot, and I could lower off of that as well. All I need to do is undo my figure eight. So let's go ahead and do that. My original figure eight that I was tied in with. I'm going to undo this new funky figure eight that we've got on the anchor, pull the loose strand through, and as you can see, I am now tied in to the anchor, and it's running through both bolts, and I can be lowered down just as I normally would. So there you have it. This new and improved version works a charm, and while I know it's best not to get yourself into these situations in the first place, the reality is you just don't always know how many quick draws you need to finish a route. So I think it's better to have a tool like this in your arsenal to be able to get yourself out of a sticky situation whenever you might need it. So yeah, if you found this interesting, then please just take one quick moment to subscribe. It won't take you more than 2 seconds, and it's the best way that you can support me and this channel to help me keep making videos like this. And yeah, stay safe, practice at home, and I'll catch you in the next one.